They stole my $2 million inheritance and laughed. Now I own their house, their business, and they'll be paying me for the next 30 years. They say you can smell a lawyer's office before you even walk through the door. Expensive leather, fresh coffee, that weird chemical scent from whatever they use to make everything look so damn clean. I smelled like diesel fuel and machine oil. My boots tracked mud across their fancy carpet. Didn't apologize. The office was in one of those new buildings in Newport, Oregon, all glass and steel, overlooking the harbor where real people actually work for a living. My brother Mark sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my truck. $3,000 suit. Hair slicked back like he was auditioning for Wall Street. Next to him, my sister Sarah wore her realtor smile. You know the one. The I'm your best friend, and I totally care about your problem smile. The same smile she probably wore when she convinced some poor family to overpay for a house with foundation issues. I'd flown in from the Gulf of Mexico that morning. 26 hours on an oil platform, then a puddle jump to Portland, then a 2-hour drive down the coast. My hands were covered in calluses. My back hurt. I was 52 years old, and I felt every year of it. Mark and Sarah always looked at me like I was some kind of wild animal that wandered in from the woods. Danny the diver. Danny who ran away to the ocean while they stayed behind to take care of Dad. That's the story they told themselves. Anyway, I looked at them and saw something different. A couple of perfectly groomed jackals waiting for the old lion to close his eyes for the last time. Dad had been gone 3 weeks. Dementia ate him alive over the last 5 years. Turned a man who could navigate by the stars into someone who couldn't remember his own children's names. Mark and Sarah had power of attorney. They made all the decisions. They were so helpful, so caring. The lawyer was some kid who looked about 12, probably graduated law school last month. He cleared his throat like he was about to deliver the Gettysburg Address. Mark took the papers from him. Didn't even let the kid do his job. My brother's voice was flat. Even. The same tone he probably used ordering a latte at Starbucks. He read through the like he was reading the weather report. The beach house went to Mark and Sarah. The one Dad built with his own hands back in the 70s. 3 bedrooms, ocean view, worth at least $800,000 in today's market. The family business, Will's Seafood, went to them too. The building, the docks, the accounts, everything. Dad's savings, gone. Medical bills, they said. Funny how those bills always seem to eat up everything right before someone dies. I sat there listening. Didn't say a word. Mark kept reading. His voice never changed. He could have been reading a phone book. Sarah kept glancing at me, waiting for a reaction. I gave her nothing. Then came the part they'd been waiting for. Sarah reached across the table and put her hand on my shoulder. Her fingers were cold. She leaned in close, and I could smell her perfume. Something expensive and flowery that probably had a French name. "Oh, Danny," she said. "Don't worry. Dad wanted to make sure you got something too. He left you his old boat, the Sea Will, and everything on it." Mark's mouth twitched. Just barely. If you didn't know him, you'd miss it. But I knew him. I'd spent 30 years watching that smug little expression. That's when I knew. They thought they'd won. They'd thrown the dog a bone. Hell, they'd thrown me something worse than a bone. They'd thrown me a rusty anchor I'd have to haul off to the scrapyard. The lawyer kid pushed manila envelope across the table. Inside were keys. Old brass keys on a ring with a faded float keychain. The kind you get at a bait shop for $5. There was also a beat-up blue binder. The kind with 3 rings that teachers used back in the 80s. Sarah was still talking. Her voice had that sympathetic tone people use at funerals. "I know it's not much, Danny, but Dad loved that boat. He'd want you to have it. It meant so much to him." I picked up the keys. They were heavy, solid, real brass, not the cheap zinc crap they make now. The kind of keys that lasted. The kind that meant something. Mark started gathering up his papers. The meeting was over. They had what they wanted. The house. The business. The future. I had a rotting boat that probably hadn't left the dock in 5 years. But something was nagging at me. Something in the back of my brain, a memory trying to surface. Not from the end. Not from the foggy, confused years when Dad couldn't remember whether he'd eaten breakfast. This was from before, way before, maybe 20 years ago, back when I was in my early 30s, before I left for the oil platforms, before everything got complicated. We were sitting on that boat, the Seawell. It was summer, late evening. The sun was going down over the Pacific, turning everything gold and orange. Dad handed me a beer. We sat there in the cockpit, rocking gently with the waves, not saying much. That was the thing about Dad. He didn't need to fill silence with noise. Then he said something. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. They love the house, Danny. Love the land. They don't understand. In Oregon, the real money is in the land. It's in the water. Everything you'll ever need is on this boat. The will is going to take care of you. At the time, I thought he was being philosophical. You know, old fisherman wisdom. The sea provides. That kind of thing. I was young and stupid, and I didn't get it. But sitting in that lawyer's office, holding those brass keys, I suddenly understood. I looked down at the binder, really looked at it. The label on the spine was faded, but I could still make out the words written in Dad's handwriting. Seawell documentation. Not Seawell. Not the Seawell. Not even SS Seawell. The Seawell. The Seawell. It wasn't a name. It was a statement. A promise. A declaration. It hit me like a rogue wave. Dad had been a fisherman his whole life. He knew how to navigate. He knew how to read water. And he knew how to play the long game. This wasn't some poetic goodbye. This was a financial instruction manual. My brother, Mark the lawyer. My sister, Sarah the realtor. They'd spent their whole lives chasing real estate. Location, location, location. By land. They don't make it anymore. Mark Twain said that. And they'd turned it into their religion. They looked at Dad's business and saw docks and buildings. Assets to sell. Money to liquidate. They looked at the boat and saw an old rusted hull taking up space. A liability. Something to dispose of. But Dad hadn't been leaving me a boat. He'd been leaving me the only thing that mattered. And they were too blind to see it. I stood up, tucked the keys in my pocket, picked up the binder. Thank you, I said. My voice was calm. Steady. I'd spent 20 years working 200 feet underwater in the Gulf of Mexico. When your air hose gets tangled at that depth, you don't panic. You weren't the problem. You stay calm. You survive. Sarah looked relieved. Mark was already checking his phone. The dog had taken his bone and was leaving. They could get back to their real work, dividing the spoils. I walked out of that office. Didn't look back. Behind me, I heard Sarah laugh at something Mark said. They were celebrating. They'd pulled it off. They'd convinced a dying old man with dementia to sign everything over to them. And they'd done it legally. Perfectly. No one could ever say they'd done anything wrong. Outside, the Oregon coast was doing its thing. Gray clouds rolling in from the Pacific. That wet, cold wind that cuts right through you. The kind of weather that separates tourists from locals. I stood in the parking lot for a minute, just breathing it in. My truck was parked next to Mark's BMW and Sarah's Mercedes SUV. My truck was 12 years old. Rust on the bumper. Dent in the passenger door from when I backed into a pole in Corpus Christi. It started on the first try. Always did. I drove down Highway 101 toward the old docks, the ones near Yaquina Bay, the docks where Dad kept his boat, where he'd kept it for 40 years. The radio was playing some country song about a guy losing his girl and his dog and his job all in the same week. I turned it off. The memory kept playing in my head. Dad's voice. Everything you'll ever need is on this boat. The will is going to take care of you. I thought he was being sentimental. Turns out he was being literal. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the gravel lot next to the docks. The place looked the same as it had 20 years ago. Same weather-beaten buildings. Same smell of fish and diesel and salt. Same seagulls, screaming overhead like they were angry at the world. The Seawell was tied up at the end of D Dock. Even from a distance, I could see she looked rough, really rough. The paint was peeling off in sheets. Rust bloomed along the railings like some kind of industrial fungus. The cabin windows were streaked with grime and salt spray. She looked like something you'd see in a magazine article about abandoned boats. I walked down the dock. My boots echoed on the wooden planks. A couple of old guys were working on their boats, getting ready for crab season. They glanced up at me, but didn't say anything. That's how it is in harbors. Everyone minds their own business. The closer I got, the worse she looked. Lines hanging loose. Fenders half deflated. A blue tarp covering something on the back deck. Torn and flapping in the wind. But when I stepped aboard, something shifted. The deck creaked under my weight. That old, tired sound. Like an old dog getting up to greet its owner. And the smell hit me. Diesel. Salt. Old bait. Bilge water. The smell of every morning I'd spent on this boat as a kid, helping Dad pull crab pots. For just a second, I wasn't 52. I was 12. Dad was standing at the helm, showing me how to read the depth finder. Mom was down below making coffee that tasted like motor oil, but somehow was the best thing you'd ever drink at 5 in the morning. I shook it off. Memories don't pay bills. I had a job waiting for me back in Texas. A platform in the Gulf that needed a welder. I was supposed to fly back in 3 days. I unlocked the cabin door. The hinges screamed. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. Same cracked vinyl seats. Same ancient marine radio. Same wooden wheel with a varnish worn off where Dad's hands had gripped it for decades. The binder was still in my hand. I sat down at the small navigation table and opened it. The first pages were what you'd expect. Old insurance policies from 1998, registration documents, an owner's manual for a diesel engine, receipts for repairs going back 30 years. Dad had kept everything, every single piece of paper. I flipped through slowly. Most of it was just clutter, documentation for equipment that had probably been replaced years ago. Then I got to the back section. 3 heavy plastic sleeves. The kind you use to protect important documents from water damage. Inside were 3 thick pieces of laminated paper. Official looking. Federal seals. Lots of fine print. I pulled one out and started reading. United States Department of Commerce. National Marine Fisheries Service. Limited entry permit. Dungeness crab. Commercial fishing license. My hands started shaking. I pulled out the other 2. Same thing. 3 permits, all in Dad's name, all valid, or at least they had been valid. The issue dates went back to the 90s. Most people don't understand fishing permits. They think you just buy a boat, get a license, and start catching fish. That's not how it works. Not anymore. Back in the 80s and 90s, the government realized the oceans were getting overfished, so they created a limited entry system. They issued a certain number of permits, and that was it. No more. If you wanted to fish commercially, you had to buy a permit from someone who already had one. Supply and demand. Basic economics. When there's only a limited number of something, and everyone wants it, the price goes up, and up, and up. In Oregon, a Dungeness crab permit was worth serious money. Real money, not house money, not new car money. We're talking the kind of money that changes your life. I sat there staring at those 3 permits. My brain was trying to do the math, try to figure out what I was looking at, but I couldn't quite believe it. That's when I noticed the envelope. It had been tucked between the permits. Official looking. An MFS logo in the corner. I pulled it out. The paper was wrinkled, like someone had crumpled it up and then tried to smooth it out again. Final renewal notice. The words were in red, bold, impossible to miss. I opened it and started reading. Legal language, federal regulations, blah, blah, blah. Then I got to the important part. Final deadline for a permit renewal. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific time. I read it again. Then again. The date on the letter was from 6 months ago. It had been sitting in this binder for 6 months. Just sitting here, waiting. My mouth went dry. My hands were actually shaking now. I looked at my watch. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. Tomorrow at 5. That gave me about 26 hours. I stood up so fast I hit my head on the low ceiling. Didn't even feel it. My mind was racing. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't Dad forgetting to renew his permits because of dementia. This was planned. This was calculated. Mark knew. My lawyer brother who handled all of Dad's paperwork, who had power of attorney, who made all the decisions. He knew about these permits. He knew what they were worth. And he knew about this deadline. They'd given me the boat. They'd given me the documentation. But they'd made sure I'd get it too late. They figured I'd take the keys, fly back to Texas, and by the time I got around to dealing with Dad's old boat, the deadline would have passed. The permits would be dead, worthless, gone forever. The permits were tied to the vessel. No boat, no permits. But also no renewal, no permits. Let them expire, and they'd be canceled. Forever. 3 permits worth millions of dollars. Wiped out because some dumb diver didn't know what he had. Then they could sell the boat for scrap. Sell the docks. Sell everything. Build their condos. Make their fortune. And no one would ever know what had been lost. I sat back down. My legs felt weak. The cabin was starting to spin a little. This wasn't just an insult. This wasn't just them screwing me out of an inheritance. This was something darker. This was them systematically destroying something Dad had built over 40 years. Something that was supposed to take care of his son. They'd manipulated a dying man, stolen his legacy, and then tried to cover their tracks by making it look like simple neglect. It was brilliant in a sick kind of way. If anyone ever asked, they'd just shrug. We gave Danny the boat. We gave him everything on it. Not our fault he didn't know what to do with it. Not our fault he let the permits expire. The perfect crime. Legal. Clean. Untraceable. Except for one problem. I'd opened the binder a day early. I still had time. Just barely. But I had time. I looked at my watch again. The second hand was ticking. Each tick felt like a hammer blow. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. 26 hours. That's all I had. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course not. This part of the dock was a dead zone. I'd have to go back to my truck. Make some calls. Figure this out. But for a moment, I just sat there in Dad's old cabin. The seat cushion was torn. The windows were dirty. The whole place smelled like 50 years of salt and fish and diesel and hard work. And sitting there, I heard his voice again. That conversation from 20 years ago. Everything you'll ever need is on this boat. The will is going to take care of you. He'd known. Even back then, he'd known. Known his other kids. Known what they'd become. Known what they'd try to do. And he'd planned for it. He'd built a lifeboat. Not for himself. For me. They'd given me a lottery ticket. A winning lottery ticket. They just thought it was going to expire before I could cash it in. I stood up, grabbed the binder, locked the cabin behind me, walked back down the dock to my truck. The old guys were still working on their boats. One of them nodded at me. I nodded back. In my pocket, the brass keys felt heavier than they should. In my hand, the blue binder felt like it was burning. Inside it were 3 pieces of laminated paper that my brother and sister thought were about to become worthless. They'd thrown me the bone. They'd thrown me the anchor. They'd thrown me the burden they thought would drag me down. What they'd actually done was hand me a loaded gun. And they'd been so confident, so sure of themselves, so certain I was too stupid to figure out, that they'd even show me where to point it. I got in my truck, started the engine, looked at the clock on the dashboard. The numbers glowed green in the fading afternoon light. 26 hours. That's all I had. Most people would panic. Most people would lose their minds. But I'd spent 2 decades working in conditions that would kill most people. 200 feet down in the Gulf of Mexico. In the dark. In the cold. With thousands of pounds of pressure trying to crush you. When your air hose tangles. When your communication line goes dead. When something goes wrong at that depth, panic kills you faster than anything else. You don't panic. You work the problem. You break it down into steps. You take it one piece at a time. You survive. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed back toward town. I had calls to make, people to find, a system to navigate. My brother Mark had spent his whole life learning how to bend the law, how to work contracts, how to manipulate papers and signatures and legal loopholes. But I'd spent my whole life learning something different: how to follow instructions, how to stay calm under pressure, how to work with what you have, how to survive. They'd given me a challenge. They'd given me an impossible deadline. They'd given me a boat they thought was worthless and permits they thought were about to die. What they'd forgotten was simple. Impossible deadlines were my job. Fixing broken equipment was my job. Working miracles with rusty tools and spare parts was what I did for a living. They thought they'd beaten me. They thought they'd won. They thought the game was over. They had no idea the game was just starting. The clock was ticking. There's a saying in deep-sea diving: panic is a luxury you can't afford at 200 feet. When your air hose tangles, when your regulator freezes, when something goes wrong in the dark and the cold and the pressure, panic will kill you faster than anything else. You don't panic. You just work the problem, one step at a time, one breath at a time. I sat in my truck outside the docks. The clock on the dashboard said 3:15 p.m. 25 hours and 45 minutes until the deadline. I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a second. Most people in this situation would call a lawyer, get professional help, pay someone in a suit to fix the problem. But lawyers cost money, and they take time. Time I didn't have. Besides, I've been watching lawyers my whole life. My brother Mark, his fancy friends, they all had one thing in common. They were really good at making simple things complicated, at turning a straightforward problem into a 6-month process with billable hours. I needed the opposite. I needed to make a complicated problem simple. The federal government wanted 2 things to renew those permits: proof the boat was seaworthy, and payment of any outstanding fees. That's it. No fancy arguments. No legal loopholes. Just 2 check boxes in a database somewhere. I scrolled through my contacts. Found the name I was looking for: Sparky. Real name was Thomas Sparkman, but nobody had called him that since 1987. He'd been Dad's marine mechanic for 40 years. Fixed everything from outboard motors to diesel engines to refrigeration units. If it was on a boat and it was broken, Sparky could fix it. More importantly, Sparky was a licensed marine surveyor. He could certify a vessel as seaworthy. His signature meant something to the Coast Guard and the federal boys. I hit dial. It rang 4 times. Then a gravelly voice answered. Sounded like he'd been smoking unfiltered cigarettes since the Nixon years. Probably had been. Hey, Sparky, it's Danny Wills. I need a favor. A big one. There was a pause. Then that familiar laugh, like sandpaper on concrete. Danny, heard about your old man. Sorry for your loss. He was a good one. Thanks. Listen, I need a vessel seaworthiness certificate for the Sea Will, and I need it today. Like, right now, not for insurance. For the feds. Another pause. Longer this time. When Sparky spoke again, his voice had changed. Lost a casual tone. Your brother and sister. They're real pieces of work. You know that? Your dad would talk to me sometimes, toward the end, when he still could talk. He knew what they were doing. Couldn't stop it, but he knew. Can you help me? For you, Danny? I'll be at the dock in 20 minutes. I always hated those 2. He hung up. I sat there for a second, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, not the warm, fuzzy kind. The cold, calculating kind. The kind that keeps you alive when everything is trying to kill you. I drove to a coffee shop with decent Wi-Fi. One of those local places that serve coffee in actual mugs instead of paper cups. The kind of place where the barista had tattoos and the customers all had laptops. I ordered something called an Americano. It cost $6. I didn't complain. I found a table in the corner and opened my laptop. The National Marine Fisheries Service website looked like it had been designed in 2003 and never updated. Government sites always look like that, like someone built them and then forgot they existed. I navigated to the permit renewal section, created an account. That took 15 minutes because the password requirements were insane. Needed uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters, a blood sample, and your firstborn child. Finally got logged in. Found a renewal form for vessel ID 905C. The Seawill status showed as pending renewal. Deadline showed in red letters. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Outstanding balance due. I clicked on the balance. The number that came up made my stomach drop. $15,350. Back fees for the previous season. Late payment penalties. Administrative charges. My brother Mark had power of attorney. He'd been handling all of Dad's finances. And somehow, he'd forgotten to pay the permit fees. For a whole year. Just forgot. Right. This wasn't neglect. This was sabotage. Let the fees pile up. Make it expensive. Make it hard. Then give the boat to the stupid brother and watch him fail. I pulled up my banking app. Looked at my savings account. $18,000 and change. Most of it from the last 2 years on the platforms. Living expenses were cheap when you're on a rig for weeks at a time. No rent. No car payment. Food was provided. I've been saving for a down payment on a house. Maybe a little place near the water. Somewhere I could retire when my knees finally gave out. $15,000 would leave me with almost nothing. I sat there staring at the number. A family at the next table was laughing about something. A kid was crying near the bathroom. The espresso machine was hissing and gurgling. Normal life. Normal problems. Normal people who didn't have to choose between their entire savings and their family legacy. My phone buzzed. Text from Sparky. At the dock. Where are you? I closed the laptop. Drove back to the marina. Sparky's truck was parked next to mine. Old Ford F-250, older than mine, more rust than paint. He was already on the boat, head down in the engine compartment. I could hear him talking to himself. He always did that. Had full conversations with machinery. He looked up when I stepped aboard. His hands were already covered in grease. He'd brought a clipboard with official forms. The real deal. Coast Guard approved certification papers. How'd she look? I asked. Sparky wiped his hands on a rag that was already more greased than cloth. Better than she should. Your old man kept her maintained, even after he couldn't take her out anymore. Hull solid. Engine turns over. Bilge pump works. She'll pass inspection. Barely, but she'll pass. How long? He looked at his watch. Give me 2 hours. I need to check the safety equipment, test the pumps, verify the navigation lights. Do it right. The feds are picky. I need it faster. Sparky gave me a look. The kind of look that says you're asking me to cut corners and we both know it. Then he grinned. For you? 1 hour. But you owe me a case of beer. The good stuff. Not that American light crap. While Sparky worked, I went back to the cabin, opened my laptop again. Connected to my phone's hotspot. The NMFS website was still up. I navigated to the payment section. Wire transfer option was available. Required bank routing number, account number, the amount, and a reference number. I had everything except the guts to actually do it. $15,000. Almost every dollar I'd saved. Gone. Poured into a rusty boat and 3 pieces of paper. If this didn't work, if I missed something, if there was some other requirement I didn't know about, I'd be broken empty-handed. But if it did work, if those permits were worth what I thought they were worth, if Dad really had left me something valuable, I thought about my brother, sitting in his nice office, wearing his expensive suit, thinking he'd won, thinking he'd gotten away with it, thinking the dumb diver would never figure out in time. I typed in the numbers, double-checked them, triple-checked them, click submit. The screen went blank for a second, then a confirmation message. Wire transfer initiated. Processing time, up to 2 hours. I had a confirmation number. 88 Alpha Tango 9765. 2 hours. That would put me at about 5:30 p.m. Still had time. Barely. The real question was whether the federal system would update fast enough, whether some bureaucrat somewhere would process the payment before the 5 p.m. deadline tomorrow. I saved the confirmation page, screenshot it, printed it to PDF, backed up everything to my email, my phone, the cloud. I'd learned a long time ago that when you're dealing with systems, you document everything. Paper trail. Digital trail. Cover your rear end. Sparky banged on the hull. Danny, need you for a second. I went out on deck. He was standing next to the life raft compartment. This thing is expired. Like, expired 10 years ago. I can pass you on everything else. But I need you to replace this. Today. Before I can sign off. Where do I get one? Marine supply store. Highway 20. Tell them it's an emergency. They'll have something. I drove to the marine supply store. Guy behind the counter looked about 19. Had no idea what I was talking about. I explained it 3 times. Finally, his manager came out. Older guy. Understood immediately. Emergency life raft. Coast Guard approved. $300. I didn't have $300 to spare. But I handed over my credit card anyway. Sometimes you have to keep doubling down. Sometimes you're in so deep that the only way out is through. Got back to the dock at 4:45 p.m. Sparky installed the life raft. Checked his list one more time. Signed the certificate. His signature looked official. Professional. The kind of signature that meant something. That'll hold up? I asked. He gave me an offended look. Danny, I've been doing this for 40 years. My certifications have been accepted by the Coast Guard, the Navy, and 3 different insurance companies. Yes, it'll hold up. He handed me the papers. I scanned them immediately. Uploaded them to the NMFS portal. Watched the little progress bar crawl across the screen. Upload successful. Now came the hard part. The phone call. The NMFS regional office number was on the renewal notice. I dialed it. Got an automated menu. Press 1 for this. Press 2 for that. Press 9 to speak to a representative. I press 9. Please hold. Your call is important to us. Current wait time is approximately 45 minutes. Then the music started. Some horrible instrumental version of Sloop John B. I'd heard worse music. Not much worse, but worse. I put the phone on speaker and waited. Sparky was packing up his tools. You good from here? Yeah, thanks, man. Seriously, I owe you. He waved it off. Your dad was good to me. Gave me work when nobody else would. I'm just paying it forward. Besides, watching you stick it to those 2 is payment enough. Let me know how it turns out. He left. I sat there on the deck of the Seawolf, listening to horrible hold music, watching the sun start to sink toward the horizon. The clock on my phone said 5:30 p.m. 43 minutes later, the music stopped. A voice came on. Tired. Female. The kind of voice that had answered 1,000 calls that day and want to go home. National Marine Fisheries Service. This is Agent Morrison. How can I help you? I switched into my professional voice. The one I use on the platforms when I was talking to inspectors and supervisors. Calm. Clear. Respectful. Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. I'm calling about a permit renewal for vessel ID 905C. I submitted payment today via wire transfer, and I uploaded a seaworthiness certificate. I need to confirm everything is in order for tomorrow's deadline. There was the sound of typing. Hold, please. More typing. Okay, I see the vessel here. Seawolf, Oregon registration. 3 commercial Dungeness crab permits. Status shows renewal pending with outstanding balance. Yes, ma'am. I paid that balance today. Wire transfer. Confirmation number 88 Alpha Tango 9765. More typing. A long pause. Okay, I see a pending wire transfer in the system. Amount is $15,350. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. And you said you uploaded a seaworthiness certificate? Yes, ma'am. About 2 hours ago. Should be in your portal. More typing. I could hear her clicking through screens. The sounds of bureaucracy, of systems checking systems, of databases talking to other databases. My heart was pounding. My hands were sweating. I realized I was holding my breath. Okay, the voice said. I see the certificate. Signed by. She paused. Thomas Sparkman, licensed marine surveyor. That's acceptable. And the wire transfer shows as pending in our financial system. Should clear overnight. I could barely breathe. So, is everything in order? Will the permits renew? Another pause. The longest pause of my life. Sir, there's a problem. My stomach dropped. What kind of problem? The wire transfer won't clear until tomorrow, and the deadline is 5 p.m. tomorrow. If the payment isn't fully processed by the deadline, the system will automatically reject the renewal. Once that happens, the permits are canceled permanently. There's no appeal process. I felt like I was falling, like the deck had just dropped out from under me. But then my brain kicked in, the part that had kept me alive underwater for 20 years. Worked the problem. Ma'am, I said. My voice was still calm, still professional. Is there any way to expedite the payment? Any emergency processing? No, sir. Banking regulations require a standard processing period for wire transfers. I can't override that. Okay, different angle. What if I came to your office, in person, with a cashier's check? Tonight, she sighed. Sir, our office closes at 5 p.m. I can't process payments after hours, and we're not open on weekends. I was running out of options, running out of time. Think, what would work? What would a bureaucrat accept? Ma'am, I said, let me ask you this. If the wire transfer is already in your system, if it's just pending, can you put a note in the file? Something that shows payment was initiated before the deadline? That's not really how it works, sir. Please. I kept my voice level. Respectful, not begging, just stating facts. My father passed away 3 weeks ago. These permits were his life's work. My siblings tried to manipulate the situation, so I'd missed the deadline. I found out yesterday. I've done everything I possibly can. I've paid the fees. I've certified the vessel. I've submitted all the documentation. I'm not asking you to break rules. I'm asking you to document that I met the requirements in good faith before the deadline. There was silence. I could hear her breathing, could hear the office sounds in the background, other people talking, phones ringing, the end of a workday. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, just slightly. Sir, she said, let me check something. Hold, please. The hold music came back. I sat there on the deck, watching the sky turn orange and pink. The water in the harbor was calm, peaceful. A couple of seagulls were fighting over something near the docks. Normal life, while my entire future hung on a bureaucrat's decision. The music cut off. Agent Morrison's voice came back. Okay, sir, here's what I can do. I can put an administrative note in your file, showing that payment was initiated in good faith before the deadline. I can also flag your renewal for manual review instead of automatic processing. That means a real person will look at it, instead of just letting the computer handle it. Will that be enough? I can't guarantee anything, sir, but it's your best chance. Make sure you monitor your email tomorrow. If there are any issues, you'll need to respond immediately. I'll do that. Thank you. Seriously, thank you. You're welcome, sir. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry about your father. Good luck. She hung up. I sat there holding the phone, staring at it. That was it. That was all I could do. The rest was up to systems and processes, and whether some federal employee tomorrow would look at the file and decide to show mercy. It was dark now. The marina lights had come on, yellow sodium lamps making everything look like an old photograph. I locked up the boat, drove to a cheap motel near the highway, the kind of place with neon sign and rooms that smelled like cigarettes even though smoking had been banned for years. I lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that deadline, 5 p.m., the clock ticking down. My phone was on the nightstand. Email notifications turned on, volume maxed. I kept checking it. Every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, nothing, just spam, ads, garbage. At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep, made instant coffee with a little machine in the room, sat by the window, and watched trucks drive by on the highway. Thought about Dad, about that conversation 20 years ago. Everything you'll ever need is on this boat. He'd known. He'd planned this. Not the details, maybe, but the general idea. He knew Mark and Sarah would try to take everything. So he left me something they couldn't see, something they dismiss as worthless, a rusty boat, and 3 pieces of paper. The question was whether his plan would actually work, whether I'd been smart enough, fast enough, whether the system would let me win. Morning came slowly. Gray dawn over the Oregon coast. I showered, shaved, put on clean clothes, went to a diner, and ordered breakfast. Couldn't eat it. Just pushed eggs around the plate and drank coffee. The clock said 9 a.m. 8 hours until the deadline. I drove back to the marina, sat in my truck, watched the water, checked my email. Nothing. 10 a.m. 7 hours. 11 a.m. 6 hours. Noon. 5 hours. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered it so fast I almost dropped it. Hello? It was a robocall about extended car warranties. I hung up, wanted to throw the phone into the harbor. 1 p.m. For hours. 2 p.m. 3 hours. I was starting to accept it, starting to realize I'd failed. The wire transfer wouldn't clear in time. The system would automatically reject the renewal. The permits would be canceled. All of it gone. Dad's legacy. My future. Everything. At 3:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. Email notification. I opened it so fast the app crashed. Had to restart it. Open it again. From NMFS Pacific Regional Office. Subject: Permit renewal status. Vessel ID 905C. I clicked it. The email loaded slowly. So slowly, like the universe was messing with me. Finally, the text appeared. Dear Mr. Wills, this email confirms that your permit renewal application for Vessel C will ID 905C has been processed and approved. Payment has been received and verified. Seaworthiness certification has been accepted. All 3 commercial Dungeness crab permits have been renewed for the current season. Physical permit documents will be mailed to your address of record within 10 business days. Status: active, renewed. I read it 3 times, then a 4th time. Then I just sat there staring at it. My phone showed 3:32 p.m. I'd made it, with 88 minutes to spare. I got out of the truck, walked down to the dock. The Seawolf was there, looking exactly as terrible as before. Rust and peeling paint, and that torn tarp flapping in the wind. But she was mine, and she was worth millions. My phone rang again. This time I recognized the number. Sparky. Did it work? He asked. It worked. He laughed. That great gravelly laugh. I knew it would. Your old man was a smart one, Danny. Smarter than those 2 will ever be. Yeah, he was. So what now? Now, I'm going to visit my brother and sister. Think they'll be happy to see me? Another laugh. Oh, this I wish I could watch. Give them hell, kid. I stood there on the deck for a while, just standing, feeling the boat move under me, feeling the wind, smelling the salt air. In my pocket, the brass keys felt warm. In my hand, the phone showed that beautiful email. Status active. Renewed. Mark had known how to bend the law, how to manipulate the system, how to take advantage of a sick old man. He thought that made him smart, thought that made him powerful. But I knew something he'd forgotten. The federal government doesn't care about your schemes, doesn't care about your plans. It just cares about check boxes. Did you pay? Yes. Is your vessel safe? Yes. Then you're approved. He'd tried to make it complicated, tried to make it impossible, tried to create a trap I couldn't escape. All those years of law school, all that experience, all those tricks. And in the end, it came down to something simple. I'd followed the instructions. I'd filled out the forms. I'd paid the fees. I'd checked the boxes. The system didn't care that he was a lawyer. It didn't care that I was a diver. It just cared whether I'd done what I was supposed to do. And I had. They'd given me a puzzle they thought I couldn't solve. What they'd forgotten was that I'd spent my entire life solving puzzles. Puzzles that would kill me if I got them wrong. This was just another problem. Another set of instructions to follow. Another system to navigate. And I'd won. The next morning, I put on my best clothes. Clean jeans. Good boots. My Carhartt jacket. The one without any stains or tears. I wanted to look presentable, professional. This was business. After all, Sarah's real estate office was in one of those renovated buildings downtown, all exposed brick and modern lighting. Her name was on the window in gold letters. Sarah Wills, Premium Properties, Luxury Coastal Real Estate. I walked in at 10 a.m. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Sarah. And Mark, if he's here, tell them Danny is here." She made a call. A moment later, she nodded toward the back. "Conference room. Last door on the right." I walked back, past the photos of luxury homes on the walls, past the awards and certificates, past all the symbols of their success, their perfect lives built on Dad's money and Mom's house, and everything they'd taken. The conference room had a glass door. I could see them inside. Sarah, Mark, and a third man, older, expensive suit, developer type. They were looking at blueprints spread across the table, laughing about something. Coffee cups everywhere. The smell of success. I opened the door without knocking. "Good morning. Sorry to interrupt." Sarah looked up. Her face went through about 5 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, confusion, annoyance. Then that realtor smile snapped into place. "Danny, what are you doing here? Did you get that old boat moved? Mr. Henderson here is the developer I mentioned. He needs the dock clear for the new project." The developer, Henderson. He stood up and offered his hand. I shook it. Firm grip, confident. A man who was used to getting what he wanted. Mark hadn't said anything yet. He was just watching me. His lawyer brain was working, trying to figure out why I was here, what I wanted, what I knew. I pulled out my phone, opened the email, set it on the table in front of them, just slid it across the glass surface like I was dealing cards. Actually, I said, "That's what I came to talk about. The dock and the boat." Sarah glanced at the phone. Her smile flickered. Mark leaned forward. I watched his eyes move across the screen, watched him read the email, watched his face lose color. He understood. Of course he did. He was a lawyer. He knew exactly what this meant. The developer looked confused. "What's going on?" I kept my voice casual, friendly even. "Mr. Henderson, your plan is to tear down Will's Seafood and build condos, right? Nice waterfront property. Ocean views. Lots of money. Good investment." He nodded slowly. "That's correct. Well, here's the thing. You can't, because as of yesterday afternoon, those docks are the registered home port for a federally licensed commercial fishing vessel. My vessel, the Sea, will try to bring a bulldozer within 100 feet of those docks, and you'll have the Coast Guard and NMFS crawling all over this project. Environmental violations, interference with licensed commercial operations, federal maritime law. It'll tie you up in court for years." "That's not true," Sarah said. Her voice was shaking. "That boat is just junk. It doesn't mean anything." I looked at Mark. He knew the truth. I could see it in his eyes. "The permits," I said. "You knew about them. You knew what they were worth. That's why you let the fees stack up. That's why you gave me the boat with 1 day until the deadline. You thought I'd miss it. Thought I was too stupid to figure it out in time." Mark's jaw was clenched. His hands were flat on the table, like he was trying to hold himself down, trying not to react. Henderson was getting angry now, the red creeping up his neck. He turned to Mark and Sarah. "You told me this was clean. You said there were no complications, no liens, no issues. What the hell is he talking about?" Sarah tried to explain, tried to use that soothing realtor voice. "Mr. Henderson, this is just a misunderstanding. We can work this out." But he wasn't listening. He was already gathering up his blueprints, rolling them up, shoving them into a tube. "You people wasted my time. You wasted 6 months of planning. This deal is dead. You hear me? Dead. My lawyers will be in touch." He walked out, didn't even close the door, just left, and with him went millions of dollars. Their perfect plan, their big score, the development that was going to make them rich. The room was silent. Sarah's eyes were getting wet. Mark was staring at the table like he could burn a hole through it with his mind. What do you want, Danny? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Money? We can pay you. We can buy the boat. Buy the permits. Name your price. I shook my head. You're not buying the boat. The boat stays with me. But the permits, those I'll sell to you. Market rate. 3 Dungeness crab permits in Oregon. Current value is about $5.2 million. That's what you'll pay me. Mark's head snapped up. We don't have that kind of money. You just killed our only deal. You know that. I know. That's why I'm not asking for cash. I pulled out the document my lawyer in Texas had prepared last night. Cost me $500 in a rush fee, but it was worth it. This is called a seller finance promissory note. I'm loaning you the money to buy the permits. $5.2 million at 9% annual interest, 30-year term, and the collateral is everything. The business, the docks, the house, all of it. Sarah was crying now, real tears, not the fake ones she probably used to close deals. This is robbery. You're robbing us. No, Sarah, robbery is what you did to Dad. What you did while he was sick and confused and couldn't fight back. This is just business, a business transaction. You get the permits you need to keep operating. I get a guaranteed income stream for the next 3 decades. Everyone wins. Mark was reading the document. His hands were shaking. If we don't sign this, I shrugged, then you don't sign it. And I dock my rusty boat at your pier. Every single day. I'll work those crab permits myself. Hire a crew. Build my own little operation right in your backyard. And you know what? I bet the IRS will be very interested to hear about how a lawyer and a realtor tried to deliberately devalue an estate asset to avoid inheritance taxes. I think they call that fraud. Tax evasion. The kind of thing that gets your licenses revoked, gets you investigated, maybe even prosecuted. The silence stretched out. I could hear traffic outside. Someone laughing in another office. Normal sounds. Normal life. While my brother and sister sat there realizing they'd lost everything. You'll really do it, Mark said. You'll really turn us in. I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the brother I'd grown up with. The kid who used to share a room with me. Who I'd played catch with in the backyard. Who'd been at my high school graduation. At some point, he'd stopped being my brother and started being something else. Something hollow. Something mean. Mark, I said, you tried to steal my inheritance. You manipulated our dying father. You set up an elaborate scheme to screw me over, and you almost got away with it. So, yeah, I'll do whatever it takes. Because you taught me something important. Family doesn't mean what I thought it meant. It's just another business relationship. And in business, you protect your assets. He signed the document. Then Sarah signed it. Their signatures looked shaky. Defeated. I signed last. Dated it. Made copies for everyone. Professional. Legal. Binding. Congratulations, I said. You now owe me $5.2 million. First payment is due on the 1st of next month. Don't be late. The contract has a clause about mispayments. One strike, and I foreclose on everything. I walked out of that office. Left them sitting there. Walked past the receptionist. Past the photos of luxury homes. Out into the Oregon morning. The air smelled like rain coming. Like change. My truck was parked on the street. Still rusty. Still dented. Still the same truck I'd driven for years. But everything else had changed. In 48 hours, I'd gone from the family disappointment to the family bank. From the dumb diver to the guy who owned everything. I drove back to the airport. Flew back to Texas. Back to my platform in the Gulf. Back to my welding equipment and my diving gear and my job 200 feet underwater. Nothing had changed there. Same work. Same crew. Same life. Except now, on the 1st of every month, a payment shows up in my account. $43,000. Every month. For the next 30 years. Mark and Sarah working. Grinding. Paying off a debt they created themselves. Paying me. Keeping their business alive. Keeping their house. But knowing that it's not really theirs anymore. It's mine. They're just renting it from me. They got what they wanted, the house, the business, the appearance of success. But they have to work for it now, every single day, for the rest of their lives. Not for themselves. For me, every dollar they make, a piece of it comes to me. Every deal they close, I get a cut. Every success they have, I benefit. They thought they were stealing land, stealing property, stealing assets. But what they actually did was sell themselves into 30 years of indentured servitude to the brother they tried to destroy, the brother they underestimated, the stupid diver who didn't understand business. Turns out I understood business just fine, better than they did. Actually, they understood real estate. Location, location, location. Buy land, because they don't make it anymore. But in Oregon, the real wealth isn't in the land. It's in the water. Always has been. Always will be. Dad knew that. He tried to teach them. They didn't listen. So he taught me instead. Left me a boat. Left me 3 permits. Left me everything I needed. The sea will. The sea will provide. The sea will take care of you. The sea will be your fortune. And he was right. Sometimes at night, on the platform when my shift ends and I'm standing on the deck watching the sun go down over the Gulf of Mexico, I think about him, about that conversation we had 20 years ago, about how he knew, how he planned it all, how he left me the only inheritance that mattered, not money, not property, not things. He left me a chance, an opportunity, a way to fight back. All I had to do was be smart enough to see it, fast enough to act on it, strong enough to follow through. Mark Twain said to buy land because they don't make it anymore. Dad said to buy permits because they don't make those anymore either. Turns out Dad was right. The land sits there, pretty, useless, just sitting there costing money. But the permits, the water rights, the access to the ocean, that's worth everything. They thought they were getting the valuable stuff. The house with the ocean view, the business with a fancy name, the bank accounts, the real estate, all the things you can see and touch and photograph for your Instagram. I got 3 pieces of laminated paper and a rusty old boat that smells like 50 years of hard work. And you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything. Because every month, on the 1st, I get a reminder, a payment, not just money, a message, a statement. You lost. I won. And you're going to spend the next 3 decades remembering it every single month. For 30 years, you'll write that check, transfer that money, and you'll remember the brother you underestimated, the diver you mocked, the son you tried to erase. And if they miss even 1 payment, if they're late even once, I take it all. The house, the business, everything. It's all in the contract. All legal, all binding, all their fault. Dad always said the sea would take care of me. He was right, just not in the way anyone expected. Not by providing fish, not by offering adventure, but by teaching me the most important lesson. The ocean doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care about your schemes. It just cares whether you can survive, whether you're strong enough, smart enough, tough enough. I survived. They didn't. And now they work for me. Forever. That's the real inheritance. Not money. Not property. Justice. Cold, calculated, permanent justice. Served on a rusty deck with ocean spray, and the smell of diesel, and the sound of waves against a hull. The sea will. It provided, just like Dad promised. And it always will.